Hey everybody, this is Chuck Marone with Strong Towns. One of the things that I get to do that all of you don't get to do is chat with Joe. And we were talking this summer, and I said, you know what, Joe, I would love it if you and I could just like every now and then uh, log on a Zoom, have you share the latest thing that you're working on and show it to people because the work you guys do at Urban 3 is the most exciting, most fun stuff I ever get to see. So, Joe Minicozzi with Urban 3, welcome. Nice to see you, Joe.
Thanks. Thanks, Chuck. Great to see you again. And this is going to be fun.
Dude, we're going to talk about Shasta,
Shasta
California.
County, Shasta County,
Shasta
California.
County.
Yes.
Do you know that we have a kind of pop here in Minnesota called Shasta Pop? Do you have Shasta?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Shasta,
Oh, you
orange
do?
Shasta's. Yeah. It's one.
Okay. So that's not just a
It's a
thing
great
for
soft drink.
us.
No.
Okay. Well, that was always like the poor man's pop. So growing up, we had a lot of Shasta. And then when I got to a certain age and a certain level of affluence, I'm like, I'm never going back to Shasta again. So when you said Shasta County, I don't know. I
Did
will think positive things. Grape
you
pop.
didn't like you didn't get up into the knee high, or that was the next level? Maybe the orange
No.
crush.
Well, Shasta had like grape, which was like true grape. They had a strawberry pop and orange. It had all the kind of like kid flavors, right? Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Shasta. It was an interesting client. One is because of, and for those of you that don't know Shasta County, Shasta is in the northern part of California, where the state of California does that bend that heads up to Oregon.
Mm.
Um, it's the prime city is Redding, California. And the other thing that's interesting, what you'll see it in the map in a second, is that it's a fairly concentrated development pattern surrounded by the forest, if you will.
Yeah,
Very, we're on the East Coast here in Asheville, and we're surrounded by forests, but the East Coast is completely different from the West Coast in the way that the forests and the city patterns are. We're more spread into the mountains in on the East Coast. We just don't have the large land tracts.
right. Okay, bring up the map. I'm going to tell you a story about Reading, or bring up your stuff. What I don't know if you know this or not, but in 2012, oh, when you and I spoke in LA at the APA conference with Mitch Silver, I started that week in Reading. Like that was where I
Oh
began
wow.
the California tour. Yeah. Um, so spoken like many, but it started in Reading. And I was kind of nervous because it was my first time speaking in California. And I thought, what do I have to say to the people here? You know, they're going to hate me, like whatever. And Will Dowdy was in the audience. I think you know Will, and he was sitting kind of in the middle, and it was a big auditorium, and half the auditorium were the smart growth environmental people, and half the auditorium was like the Agenda 21, Second Amendment kind of people. And as I'm giving my talk, it was going really well. Like it felt really good, and the audience participation was great, and the feedback was good. And Will gave me one of those compliments that you get where you're like, okay, I feel I, it gave me confidence in what I was doing. He said, Chuck, I sat in the middle and I listened to them both applaud. And they both thought you were speaking to them and making fun of the other side. And he said that is a huge win. And I always took that as thank you, Will. Like that took a very nervous, apprehensive guy and gave him a lot of confidence when he needed it. So I have a soft spot for Reading.
Yeah, I mean, it's not far from Eugene. It's probably maybe 3 or 4 hours from Eugene, Oregon.
He was in Chico
Um,
then. He
oh,
was
he's in Chico. Okay.
he was in Chico at that point. Yeah. Yeah, but he's in Eugene now. Yeah.
Yeah, so Chico is just straight west of that, on closer to the coast.
Right.
Um, yeah, so wow, where to start? One of the things about Shasta County is the growth pattern. Um, just the population change, and when you see places change this way, one is it's kind of freaky to just within the span of what 20 years you see this huge growth from 1980 to 2000.
Uh-huh.
Um, Most of this has been concentrated in Reading, but a lot of it is kind of slid south. Now, we're data people, so we're going to take their whole population and kind of break it down. So here's their population. So Reading is by far the prime. Anderson, Cottonwood, Bella Vista, those are near suburbs of Reading. What's interesting is for everybody in the room and the audience here, just take the population and divide it into the area and just figure out the density, because it gives you a different reveal on the place. And this is sort of a little jarring to them, is that places like Anderson or Bella Vista, well, let's say take Anderson, for instance, how is a bedroom community more dense than the biggest city in the county? But it is. It's data, right?
Right.
From a county perspective, well, now gotta jump ahead here. This is the county's map of total value. We like to say, we call this the miles per tank version. So the bigger parcels by the highway are valuable. And then when you go from total value to value per acre, you see this shift. And then here's the 3D. So it's like a series of mountains in a little constrained spot. Well, a lot of that is because of the forests around the whole thing that kind of hem it in. But also it's the typical pattern of a lot of cities that they tend to follow the highway. So it's almost like Reading got drained along 5 north and south from there. But just to kind of isolate into the cities, this is sort of a perspective of remember I said Anderson here is more dense than Reading, but you can see the potency of Reading here.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, so that part was kind of fun. California, sorry, just for a taxable, non-taxable. I'm just like skipping through some slides here.
Yeah, you're fine. It does. I mean, it is very California, right? Like we're going to get all of our growth 1950s and later, and it will happen in like now's your time in the sun. So we're going to, grow houses for 2 decades or 3 decades, and then you're done, right?
Well, or you're going to keep on like doing that, keep on keeping on. It's just that pattern will persist if you're not analyzing it.
Right.
Just for the sake of East Coast audiences, you rarely see an entire county that's almost 50% non-taxable. But that's what you get in the forests. And then let's kind of jump ahead again. Let's see. Here's some examples.
Wow. I wonder how those patchworks came about, the like checkerboard stuff. Because it's like one section is public and the next section is not. And
correct. Well, what it is it's a grid may be private today because somebody's got the private rights inside the forest to get out there and do whatever they need to, log or whatever, and then those flip. So it's that's kind of another quirky part of, it's fun because it shows up on a map pretty clearly. Let me jump back to that real quick. Like a DJ.
Well, I just I've never seen that before. And look, I mean, it's a little bit like you can see where the section lines are, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
But again, it might be a 50-year tract or it might be a 10-year tract. We don't know, but for the sake of the audience, I mean, that may as well be, it's going to revert, all that stuff inside the forest will revert to public land inside the Shasta forest. And it's just different forests have different rights.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Is sort of weird when you first see it. It's like a checkerboard out there. Let's see. Jump ahead. So zooming back into the city, and these are some of the examples of buildings. So single family is pulling about $500,000 an acre. Commercial structures are pulling to 2.8, offices 4.3, multifamily is 4.7, and that isn't exactly anything to write home about architecturally, but it's crushing it. And again, there's biases where people are like, multifamily doesn't pay taxes. It's like, well, no, yes, they do. And the other thing about multifamily is in states where they have homeowner exemptions, a renter can't get that. Right. So renters are going to be paying more taxes. And also from a density standpoint, you can see it there. Well,
in California, you would actually, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that single family housing, especially with Prop 13, is going to have an artificially suppressed tax rate, and that multifamily is going to have a very high rate on a higher price, right?
But Prop 13 does track on multifamily as well.
It
I think
does.
that's one of the,
Okay.
yeah, it's one of the dirty little secrets, is that the people that
Okay.
actually pushed Prop 13 were the commercial multifamily people. And
Interesting.
yeah, and it was easier to sell to homeowners, that it was
Sure.
good for them too. And then mixed use, you're seeing it about 9 million. And then
Look at that.
this is where you see Prop 13 come in again at a commercial level. Like, how on God's green earth is a 1-story commercial building the most potent thing in the entire community?
That
Because
is that is crazy.
Prop 13, one of the little dirty little secrets on it is, like, if I'm a commercial property owner, um, I could own a property in an LLC called, Strong Streets LLC.
Yeah. Yeah.
The mailing address is my office. Now,
Hmm.
I could sell you the LLC that owns that building. I could sell you Strong Streets. What is transacted is the purchase of a corporation.
Right.
The assessor doesn't know, because the
Right.
assessor still sees that the same owner is there, called Strong Streets. Does that make
The
sense?
title hasn't changed hands. It's just the change of ownership. Yeah.
Correct. So
Yeah.
that's one of the perversions in California, is we saw early on. We look at some commercial properties and we're like, that's a 4-story building. That's got to be more potent, but it's trapped in amber because of Prop 13.
Right.
Um, it's
Oh,
just,
that's so interesting.
it's pretty weird. But
Hmm.
but the thing is, though, is the majority of property owners are all single family owners. But 80% of any city is going to be residential land use. So all of this stuff out here in the yellows are all Prop 13 people. So,
Yep.
the voter is going to want to keep that thing in place because they think they're making out like bandits. The reality of it is the commercial side is making out even better.
Can I ask you a technical question?
Sure.
Um, when you look at like a single family home, do they uh, assess that at a lower value because of Prop 13, or is it assessed where like a normal assessment would be, but then the taxes are just based off of a different value? How do they like actually go about doing that?
It's basically, if you show up and buy a house,
Hmm.
it triggers at the purchase price.
Right.
So, you come in, you buy a house for $400,000. Then what ends up happening is that's your value, but it can
Hmm.
only grow by, I think it's 2%
A
per
certain amount
year,
each
over
year.
a certain amount of percentage over a year. And then that's it. And so the longer you hold on to your house, the more you're
The
just
more it diverges from reality.
correct.
Yeah.
Um,
So
actually,
you don't even need assessors really in California, do you?
well, it's kind
We'll
of
say that amongst friends.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but actually, you can see it. Like, you can see it here in the model. See this kind of pale green stuff right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an older first wave suburb right there.
Okay.
Right behind it is newer stuff. So the newer
Yep.
stuff's going to come in on the market at a much higher heat
So
than the
starts at a
older
higher
stuff.
baseline. Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you can see even down here in Cottonwood, you can tell where old Cottonwood is, and then the new stuff down here.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, we see it pretty clearly in California cities where the new stuff is almost like a rash. Now
Right.
the other thing about, because of that, it's like when you stop one form of revenue, you got to still pay for the city. So in California, what ends up happening is they flip over more toward retail sales. And when you look at, um, let's see, I think we have it in here. Let me jump to the budget real quick.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You need to
might be
get
full.
that auto dealership because they help out with the retail taxes.
Which is great until somebody opens up an auto dealership in the next town over
Right.
and cannibalizes
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
cannibalizes sales.
Yeah.
I'll find the budget in a second, but this is the sales tax production. So with our work, we have to be, it's math. We have to be honest to the math and let the math tell what's going on. So
Hmm.
there is some stuff that's unmappable. That's going to be like, you stay at home and you buy a something on Amazon or something like that. You're still paying a retail sales tax, but
Right.
it's going to be non-point source. It's going to be something that's not like a Best Buy. You're going to that Best Buy to purchase. But you
Sure.
see, typical of this of a place, all that retail is going to follow the highway. Um, and that's what's going on there. So to show them, one of the things we want to do is show their money with the property tax stacked on top of the sales tax to show them how they actually flow. And then
Yep.
this is what it looks like. So the property tax
Wow.
is stacked on it. And you can see how paltry the property tax is.
Yeah, it's dominantly retail tax. I did not know that about California.
Yeah.
I thought the property
Well,
tax was a greater percent. It's really not, is it?
no. Well, the thing is, though, is notice when you look at some of the side views of the model, you can see how
Mm-hmm.
deep the property tax is here
Yeah,
compared to some of the big boxes over here. You can barely see any property tax on it at all.
right.
So that's where you can see the downtown stuff. This one, if you can see my cursor,
Yeah, I can.
that's yeah, see how much red there is there compared
Uh-huh.
to out here at the big box where there's no red on it at all.
Right.
So it's just the downtown stuff's going to give you more of a booster. But also, to be fair, that downtown transactions are highly concentrated. So even though it's not if you look at the gross of a Walmart, the gross of a Walmart
Yeah.
is great, but it's also going
Yeah.
to be dissipated over a large tract of land where that the transactions in a downtown, there's going to be more transactions happening in a smaller space. So it's going to be far more potent.
Right.
And
Your productivity goes way up.
correct.
Yeah.
So now remember the county can't get the retail sales tax because that's happening in the city. So it stays in the city. So this is what the county gets when you drop the cities out of it. So they're way more dependent on property tax across the
Wow.
whole system.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So remember, the folks inside Reading in here or in Cottonwood are going to be paying county property taxes. But
Right.
in Reading and Anderson, they're their own incorporated areas. So they get to harbor and keep the sales taxes. So they're like, thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have our own money. So it actually behooves the county to really pay attention to the inside of the city because that's where they're getting the property taxes.
Right.
Um,
Well, and I think we're going to look at this in a second. I'm guessing, inside the city, the county doesn't have to maintain the roads, but outside of the city, that's their expenses go sky high, right?
correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's any all of the audience here, strong townspeople. You talk about roads all day long, so let's go ahead and bring them into the discussion. So there's a lot of roads in the entire county. The county maintains about 1,100 miles. There are private roads, or they call them PRDs, private road divisions. So that would be like a subdivision with a gate on it or something. And then there's all others. When we say all others, that's the city of Reading's roads, Anderson's roads, but the county maintains. It's not a small number. 1,100 miles is enough roads from Reading to go to Fort Collins. So
Yeah.
we always like to make it on a map because I hate it when people are like, actually, I'm going to refer back to you when you talk about the, it's like how many times you can go to the moon and back, if that
Right.
abstract like if people understand that.
Yeah.
Whenever people talk about the miles of roads, I feel it's the same thing. It's like people have a hard time when you say it's 2,000 miles. It's like, what does that mean?
Right.
So we put on the
Right.
map so people can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so back to the roads. So we try to help people understand is when that road gets built, and this is the way that we graphically show it, is it gets paved, the road's built, and then you have a series of key events, key birthdays in the road. So that road has to be maintained and resurfaced every 10 years as a cycle. This is a really, for the engineers in the audience, lots of engineers always have the gotcha question. Well, it's like, well, it's not every single road. I mean, some roads last 20 years. It's like, yes, if you're only driving on the road with like mopeds and bicycles, that
Right.
road can last a lot longer than if you're driving it out with a truck,
Yeah.
or worse, a milk truck or a garbage truck or things like that. That heavy things wear the road down.
I actually read an article today, and I don't know if this is true, but it sounds like it makes some sense to me. They're suggesting that electric vehicles are actually doing more damage, creating more potholes and wheel ruts because the torque on them is so much higher that, not when they're kind of coasting, but when they're accelerating and decelerating, they have a lot more roadway friction and roadway wear than a gasoline powered car, which, accelerates more slowly. Uh, so yeah, I mean, every road, I always tell people, like, every road's going to be different, right? Like I've seen them fall apart in 10, 15 years. I've seen ones that have been around for 40, 50 years that are still passable, but like entropy over time destroys your road. Even if nobody's driving on it, your road will go away in a generation and a half, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, this is the psychology of how people um process information. There's the everybody you're always going to get the audience where there's the gotcha people. It's like, have you thought about blah blah blah? It's like, well, look,
Right.
fine. I know that the average human lifespan is, what is it, 80 years, 70, 78
Right.
years now.
Yeah, 78 years. Yeah. But
Okay,
I know the person, Joe, who lived to be 105.
fine. There are people that didn't make it to 70. So it's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
just assume, okay, can we all at least agree that we're all going to die at some point? Okay, fine.
Hmm.
The same is true with a road. It will fall apart, you
Right.
know? So
Yeah. Yeah.
conceptually, this is the
Hmm.
cartoon of what happens. And then once you reach those cycles, eventually you hit this thing called a reconstruction, and that's the heavy lift. That's where you have
Yeah.
to essentially get to the super expensive stuff. The number we use in Shasta, and again, we ran this through with the engineer. Um, I'm no engineer, so what's fun for us is we have to depend on engineers, and it's kind of fun, the psyche of an engineer versus the psyche of someone like me that's like an architect or an urban designer. The engineers always push back on this, and we're like, well, you've got to rebuild a road at some point. And like, well, yeah, it's like, let's just accept that. We'll take that. Yes, 1.5 million. And he was like, yeah. And he's like, well, but this could be 20, 30 years more. And I'm like, yes, I understand. Depends on the road. But the
Right.
cycle for everyone is we go through this. Now, what we do that's about the math, whenever anybody in the audience sees one of the red black models of the costs and revenue, what we're doing is looking at that taking the full lump of future payment and spreading it into the years preceding that. So it's like a reserve account. You're going to spend that sooner or later. You might as well start saving now. So think of it this way. Um, I just re-roofed my house. I know that that's a 25-year roof. If I'm going to plan on staying in that house forever, then it's probably hard to say now that I'm like in my mid 50s. I don't know if I'll make it to that useful life end, but if I was in my 20s, I would definitely hit it, right? So
Right.
I'm gonna need to have that $15,000 in the future to pay for that re-roofing, or I better make enough money when I get there that it's not going to kill me. So that's what we say about the roads. It's just the same thing, but we're not talking $15,000 here. We're talking serious amounts of money when you multiply
Right.
a
We,
1,000 miles times 1.5.
I like to think about it is, do you actually have the capacity, right? Like your roof is $15,000 to fix. Well, if you're making 400,000 a year, that's probably, something that you could manage. If you're making 25,000 a year, that's going to really kill you. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah,
And so there's a certain, like, okay, how does this relate to what our income is and what our capacity is? And, does that in a sense make sense? Not that you're going to create some reserve fund, because cities, I mean, in California, I would never do that, because I remember in 2010 when California had the huge budget deficits, they just stole all the reserve funds from their cities. But do you have like the tax base and the capacity to make good on this promise you've made?
yeah, yeah. So and that's the basic thesis here. And so it's just,
Hmm.
let's accept the fact that roads are forever. By the
Yeah.
way, I got hats off to Brooke Robinson, who made this. I mean, this is one of my favorite memes lately.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that 1.5 million deficit over, or what, that deficit over the cost of all of the roads, you're talking $33 million of revenue that they're not spending or they don't have, which is, it's similar to about 9 times all the sales taxes that they get. So one of the ways that we're trying to, again, a lot of this is in defense of the elected officials. No one's ever shown them this. When they look at
Right.
their budgets, this is what they see with their money on the left in revenue. And then on the right is their expenses. And we're like, well, not so fast. You're missing an expense item, the 67 million. So we're going to go ahead and throw that in. So this is really what your
Mhm.
budget should look like. So this is the, and you talk about this all day long. What's the operating
Right.
deficit that you're in? So people need to understand that. Um,
So this
so
is you might have a balanced budget year to year, and you might even have a balanced budget without a road backlog where you're actually keeping up with things, but you have these future expenses that you can easily look at and say, like, here's what this is going to be 5 years from now, 20 years from now, and allocate that, recognize that that's there. There really isn't a lot of incentive, particularly not in the way governments do accounting, for them to do what you're showing here, right? Like, it's better just to ignore it, and
or
everything's
go out.
great.
We end up happening is you go out and take out a bond, which
Right.
means that everybody has to spend more money, and you're also spending money to a bank on money
Yeah.
you didn't need to do. So, we just did I think it was like a 70 million dollar $70 million bond here in Asheville. Well, the
Mhm.
cost of buying that money was $30 million. That's what we're paying in interest to a bank or to a lender to
Yeah.
get that money. Like, why? We just lost 30 million bucks. That's insane.
Right. But not
Um,
even, I mean, with that example there, you could say, we'll take out a bond, but you'll take out a bond and you need to also increase your spending by 50% of your road budget, right? Like, you still would have a massive tax increase to make that bond payment if you went that direction.
correct. So
Yeah.
this is just
Yeah.
another way of showing the money. These are called Sankey charts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we like to, we're visual folks here. And I gotta give props to T Decker who did this one. But
Hmm.
basically, T wanted to show here's the money coming in, here's where it flows into the fund, and then the fund spends it in those buckets. California is pretty restrictive about road spending. So they have that's where the intergovernmental revenue comes from, gas tax, basically. There actually is a secret little bonus in California. They distribute the gas tax money based on density and population. So
Right.
there's actually an incentive for you to add more people and not add more roads. That's baked right into the policy,
That's
which is kind
interesting.
of interesting.
This is when I look at that, Joe, it's always that intergovernmental revenue number. It's so interesting to me because, I can get frustrated sometimes with how California local governments tend to be focused like up the government food chain, right? Like, they're not really focused on their own tax base, but you look at this and, like, where's your money coming from? Well, it's not coming from your property tax. I mean, some of it is, but not really. It's not really coming from your sales tax. Licenses. I mean, these are all like cherries on top of the intergovernmental revenue pie.
Yeah.
That's
We see that.
crazy.
Yeah, we see the same thing in New York State, and I think a lot of
Yeah.
it might be that where you have prime cities that are massive economic generators, they're
Hmm.
hemorrhaging money into the state. The state takes that and redistributes it through. It's
Right.
also the political behavior of the place is like that too.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
there's other states we can show you that are sort of like they're left on their own, and they have to
N-
find other ways to
Totally.
find money.
Yeah. See that too.
Um, so anyway, this is just with their spending on the roads. That and even let's go back to the PRDs for a second. What I find kind of interesting about this chart. Oops, a little too far here.
Those are
Go
the
back.
personal road. Because when you said
Correct.
that, I'm like, oh, these are just ones where when the road needs to be fixed, they'll petition to have the government take it over.
That, but also check this out. They
Yeah. What are they?
actually they actually put in they put in money to pay for the PRDs, and I'm like, look, y'all aren't even charging enough in the
Yeah.
PRDs to pay for what they spend.
Yeah.
And it's just like you undercharge them. I understand that you're getting money from them, but you're asking for pennies on the dollar from them.
Right.
Uh, by the way, people ask me about impact fees, and when I get into impact fees or whenever you look at them, and also when you talk to the people that have adopted them, they're like, "Well, this is what we could get out of it. This is what we were going to pluck the goose until before it screams, right?
Right.
So
Right.
this is what we could get out of the developers. So it's like you're not getting real full cost, are you, for the impact fee? So you're negotiating less than what the real
Yes.
cost is in order
Yep.
to get approved. This is
Right.
the same deal with the PRDs. It's like this is all you could politically muster out of those
Hmm.
developments, which is like right out the door, you're undercharging.
Right.
Okay.
So this is a bad investment day one. Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, so just to sum it up, from the roads to close the roads chapter, they can basically afford about 51% of their roads. So we gave them a chart to show them that. We like to do a map and just say, we're not saying just let the red roads revert to dirt. I mean, that's an option. But it's just, you basically own more than you can cover,
Right.
as a community. So, you've got that road that goes all the way to Fort Collins, and
Mhm.
you run out of money basically at the salt flats. In
Yeah. Yeah.
in
That's a
Utah.
terrible, place to be stranded. If you're the Donner family, especially, right?
Yeah. Let me kind of, and before we got on, we talked a little bit about politics of place. And
Yeah.
this is something that kind of sort of blew my mind. Cottonwood, that little town that's way south of Reading, it sort of reminded me a lot of I live in Asheville, and yes, we're East Coast, different kind of mountains here, different kind of parks, but we have a really big park called Pisgah National Forest. It's part of the Blue Ridge Parkway, and it basically bends our development pattern around it. So much like the East Coast, we follow highways too. But here's a little town of Brevard, and Brevard is, I mean, it's Dan Mayberry, the mayor that was
Yeah.
there for 25 years. His name is Mayor Jimmy. Is 30 miles away. It doesn't look much different from this postcard, and I thought this would be interesting. It's like, look, we understand small towns too. This is your next step up. Go Cottonwood up to Brevard, little 2-story buildings. Like seriously. So here's Cottonwood side by side with Brevard. And if you look at the populations, they're kind of the same. Oh,
Hmm.
incidentally, anybody on this podcast, you can go to our website. There's this thing called Urban Mirror, and you could type in any city side by side, and it will zoom into the Google map. Feel free to use this, steal it, do whatever you want. But we just put in like the population here, so same population pretty much. Um, but what's interesting when you look at the cities, Cottonwood's downtown is way at the bottom, and if you look at Brevard, their downtown's kind of in the center. So
Mm.
just to make it like a cheap urban design way of looking at it, you've got a fried egg with the yolk at one edge of the egg, or you've got a fried egg
Hmm.
with the yolk in the center. Um, when you have it in the center, it sort of has more access to the neighborhoods around it. And
Yeah.
Cottonwood, what happened with Cottonwood is it actually started down here and it just blew up following the highway.
They built the
And
highway. Right.
yeah, and
Yeah.
Brevard has a highway going through it, but that was like an old horse trail. That's
Right.
is kind of the pattern.
Yeah. It was probably expanded much after the city was kind of mature.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of
Uh-huh.
this is like it's sort of like urban forensics. Like, how did this place grow?
Yeah.
And
Right.
and so here are the downtowns. These are the 3 blocks of real meat, if you will, on the bones of Cottonwood on the left, and then it turns
Yep.
into surface parking lots and stuff like that around it. When you look at Brevard, though, now remember this is just 1,000 more people, and you look at the scale of that downtown. It's got broad shoulders. It's like it's expanded beyond the main street, and it's got some context to it. A lot of jobs nearby, and again, these are only 2 and 3-story buildings. We're not talking about anything huge. And then if you
Right.
look at the street view, this is Cottonwood's main street, and they have hot rods and hogs, like showing off cars and stuff
Okay.
like that. It's a very wide
Yeah.
street.
Yeah, it
Maybe this
is.
could maybe this could be a solution for Strodes. You should have hot rod days or
Uh-huh.
something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then here's Brevard's main street. It's a
Yeah.
3-laner. If you think about it, it's actually, I guess, they got angled parking on Cottonwood, but they have
Yeah.
street festivals too. So it's just like small town America. Um,
Sure. Sure.
and again, population is pretty close.
Right.
Um, Now, what this means when you grow up your downtown, the taxable
Wow. Look at that.
value, yeah, is so much more potent. But really, I think the story here is more the imagery. Look, you can clearly see where downtown Brevard is this kind of mountain right
Uh-huh.
here. Well, Cottonwood really doesn't stick up their main street because there's really not a lot of buildings fighting for the cause, if you will. Um,
Hmm.
you get a block off. If you just walk off Main Street to the next parcel back, you're into surface parking lots and low developed. It never thickened up. It never grew
Right.
outward, you know?
Right. Yeah. That's crazy, especially when you think of just the macro stats on California and North Carolina too. I mean, if you just said to someone, all right, you're gonna have a downtown in California or in North Carolina, which one's going to be more, have greater tax base, be more successful? I think you would naturally pick California just because the demographics of the state kind of suggest more affluence, but it's not even close. It's not even
No,
close.
no. And the thing is,
Wow.
like, it's what was frustrating in showing this is just I'll be honest, the reaction of the county, the county council, here are the elected officials, and it's like this wasn't good enough for them. And it's sort of like,
Yeah.
well, okay, fine. If I can't use an example of another town, let's use your own place. So here's the population of Reading in so Cottonwood right now is 6,300. If you go back in time to 1940 Reading, it's not much different, right?
Right. Right.
8,000. So 1940 Reading had a grid pattern like this. We just pulled an old map. This is the old USGS map. This is a postcard, or sorry, a photo that we found from the 1940s of Main Street Reading. So how about that?
That's
It's like
crazy.
this is
Yeah.
way more
Yeah.
potent than
Yeah.
Brevard.
It's funny
Um,
because I always get that, like, okay, well, this is a city on the other side of the country. Show me something near me. Here's something near you, right?
yeah,
Here's
exactly.
here's
What
old, here's a, you basically back when you were a kid or something, right?
or let's go back to when you were a toddler in
Uh-huh.
1910, when you were
Oh wow.
3,500 people.
Yeah.
So,
Look at that.
the people that built this urbanism,
Uh-huh.
had horse technology, they
Right.
used
Right.
mining shovels, so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's and I've seen your presentation a million times when you talk about the people that settled your town back in the day.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating that story is really something that we need to internalize and look at our own communities better.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. What aliens built this?
mhm.
Well, they were just poorer people than us,
Yeah, I
making,
mean,
making good use of space.
these weren't San Franciscans or people from
Right.
Paris that made this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
these are people just kind of like going out in the mountains mining things, and this is
Yeah.
what they built for themselves.
Quite literally,
So
it was probably some of their, if you've been there a long time, it's reuse your relatives, right? Built
correct,
this.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh-huh. That's crazy.
So
Because look, I mean, if you were, I'm just going to impose, I feel like if you lived in Cottonwood today and you could say, we'll swap out our downtown for 1910 Reading, I think you'd do that in a heartbeat, right?
I'm starting to lose faith in people. I would say yes, but it's
uh,
like I just don't understand how this could be offensive.
uh-huh. Yeah. I
And
mean,
I
it's
want
gorgeous. Yeah.
well, I also want to have empathy and just say, okay, well, I need
Right.
to understand why this is so scary
Mhm.
to you.
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah.
changes. It's always kind of phenomenal, and maybe it's just the tenor of where the place is at politically right now, where this is somehow a UN conspiracy to build a 15-minute city or whatever. But it's to me, it's just this is the history of human civilization and how
Yeah.
we build things.
I don't
This
get
isn't.
so I'm looking at Cottonwood. I always get a kick out of just the reflex to build a center lane, because the center lane, the idea of a center lane is that the cars are driving through so fast and you want to keep the traffic flow going. So get the turning traffic out of the way so that that through traffic can go through really, without being hindered. And I look at this and I'm like, well, where are they where are they turning? Like what are you turning into?
Well, it's even worse. And I mean, okay. To be
Yeah.
fair,
Yeah.
why the hell does Brevard have one? Are they going to like turn
Yeah.
into a
Yeah.
building?
I mean,
It's
even
like,
even more lunacy. Yeah, no, I'm
yeah,
totally with you. I saw that in Brevard too, and I'm like, huh? I feel like it's one of those like engineering reflexive things because I've seen this, it's like it's a 4 lane and like let's go to 2 lanes and they're like, no, how about 3? And it's like they can't give up that space for whatever reason, but it serves no like utility.
It's stacking because there's going to be about
Yeah.
50 cars that are going to queue up for that turn. And
Yeah.
better have backup space for them.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, this is I don't know what else you want to see on this.
That's perfect, man. Let's
But
let's do this again. This
yeah,
is exactly what I was hoping for because I feel like you and I get to chat and you like, I think people don't know this, but like, probably won't be surprised that you like call me up and are like, hey, I want to show you this thing. Or, you and I wind up somewhere together and you take me aside and are like, let me show you slides. And it's always super cool. And I'm like, we gotta let other people have this experience too. Cause
yeah.
this
Well,
is
the other thing is
some fun
the,
stuff.
the other thing is like I think I want to thank you for documenting this because there's going to be folks in your audience that are going to relate more toward the Shasta County. There's
Yeah.
going to be folks that relate to Brevard. Our next conversation, we just finished a project in Gilbert, Arizona, totally different kind of environment. So that's a fast growing suburb in Phoenix. And then we'll have that in the catalog here. So eventually we can build. I get excited about all of these like it's almost like taxidermy. We're getting like little models that we can hang on the wall of this is
Yeah.
what this city looks like. But
Yeah.
you start to see these patterns over and over again of what choices people made in the past and what choices we're making today and what the direction is. So, the shape of your future could be a Brevard. The shape of your future could be in Anderson or Cottonwood, or it could be Reading. It's just what do you want to choose with your community and make sure that you're flying into decisions with your eyes wide open on data.
Can
That's
we
what we care about.
Can we close with this? Will you tell the story of the guy who asked you, well, have you ever analyzed a place like, because I've heard them all, and that one was like so typical.
Yeah, it's frustrating the resistance, and part of this is like, as a professional, it borders on insulting. But it was a bit of a show. So after the presentation, there were some citizens that accused me of trying to get them to follow the UN 15-minute city conspiracy. And it's just like, I'm just showing you your information. I'm not
Right.
telling you how to live. I don't care. I've got my own community. When you go to your doctor, if you're a smoker, your doctor's going to show you your lungs. There's going to be spots on your lungs, and your doctor's going to be like, look at these spots on your lungs. They're happening because of that cigarette in your hand. I'm not going to be there with you to pull it out of your hand. That's your choice. And good luck. Call me when you need your chemo. It's like
Right.
that's our attitude. It's like, this is your community. We're just going to give you your X-ray. So of course it turned into this free for all. I mean, it was tinfoil hat kind of behavior from the citizens. And it's just like, all right, cool. If that's how, if you're going to get up in front of your whole entire community and act like that kind of clown behavior, that's on you. But when you're an elected official and you encourage that, that's a little upsetting because it's sort of like, I want to see good governance and just don't play down to the audience. But this one commissioner or counselor said to me, he was serious. Have you ever analyzed a county that is north of Sacramento, west of Nevada, and south of Oregon? and
Hey, Joe, I see these models you've done all over the place. I see you've done Texas and I see you've done Oklahoma and you've done in New England and Florida. But have you ever done north of Sacramento, south of Oregon?
Well, the funny thing was, I was like, well, I mean, it sort of threw me for a loop because I was like, yes, we did your county. But I couldn't want to say that. I was like, well, technically, Santa Rosa, we did Sonoma County, and he argued with me, and I'm like, no, it actually is north of Sacramento. Look at a map. The other thing is we did Placer County, which is just to their east. And it's like, so yes, we have. We've also done places way more rural, like Wyoming, rural.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, Montana rural. Like this is you're rural, but Reading's a huge city compared to
No, huge.
Helena,
Right.
Montana.
Joe,
So
I'd
anyway,
like you to come to Brainerd, but have you ever analyzed anything north of Little Falls, south of Pequot Lakes, east of Pillager and west of Crosby? Now tell me, because there's no other place like this in the entire world. It's a
we're all
unique,
we're all special. All
we're all
special.
special. We're
Snowflakes,
all
special little
special.
snowflakes. Yep.
That's right. All
We're
right.
all
Thanks,
unique.
friend.
Thank you. See you next
Next
month.
time. See ya.